was almost quitting time when a message popped up in the office Slack channel. Gary texted that there was a mutated zombie in the building and warned everyone not to leave. Nobody bought it. Half an hour after he supposedly left for the day, Brad rushed back in. He slammed the glass doors shut and locked them. He told us not to go out because there were zombies in the halls. But Brad was hiding his hand behind his back, and fresh blood was dripping onto the carpet. Gary had clocked out an hour ago. People in the chat started roasting him. They asked how he knew there were zombies if he was already home and accused him of just trying to keep us from clocking out. It had been a year since the initial outbreak. People were not as terrified of the regular infected anymore. We figured we could easily take down a few stragglers. The problem was the variants. They looked exactly like us and had high intelligence. They hid in plain sight like cockroaches. Luckily, humanity figured out a way to identify them. If you shine a bright light into their eyes and their pupils do not constrict, they are a variant. 3 months ago, the government distributed a paralyzer spray. One hit would disable a variant for a short time, giving you a window to kill them or run. Everyone in the office had a can of it. That was why no one took Gary's text seriously. Quitting time came and went, but nobody actually left. We were just regular office workers without weapons, and nobody wanted to risk it. Breaking the silence, Brad spoke up. He asked if we seriously believed Gary. He flexed his muscles, shook his tactical flashlight and spray, and offered to scout ahead. Brad was a gym rat and looked like he could handle himself. Chloe raised her hand and said she would go with him. Kevin agreed to tag along too. Brad looked around and asked if anyone else was coming. I shook my head. I told them I was in no rush and would just wait for the official rescue teams. Brad grabbed a baseball bat from beside a desk and scoffed at us for being paranoid. The three of them left. I pulled out my phone and opened my iMessage survival group chat. I texted Luke and Sarah that I would be stuck at the office a bit longer because there was a rumored variant in the building. Luke told me to stay put and let them know if I needed backup. Sarah and Luke were my squad. If it were not for them during the early days of the outbreak, I would have been dead a year ago. Today was Luke's birthday, and we had plans to celebrate. 10 minutes later, Gary replied in the office chat. He said he was just kidding and wanted to prank us. The office erupted in anger. People started cursing him out, telling him he was out of his mind and threatening to report him to the authorities. Gary just replied that he would buy everyone lunch tomorrow to make up for it. The tension in the room evaporated. People started packing their bags. Then Anna spoke up. She pointed out that Gary never used exclamation marks, but his last few texts were full of them. She hesitated before asking if Gary might have been infected. Everyone froze. I scrolled up through the chat history. She was right. Gary was a stoic guy who always used periods, even in emergencies. A hot-headed coworker tagged Gary, demanding a video proving his pupils constricted within 10 minutes, or we would call the authorities. I rubbed my palms together. Gary never joked around, let alone pulled a stunt like this. A heavy realization settled over the room. We were all thinking the same thing. Right then, Brad came back with his baseball bat. He looked panicked and immediately deadbolted the main doors. He leaned against the glass, panting, and swore there was a variant in the building. I asked where Chloe and Kevin were. Brad looked down and slid to the floor. He said Chloe got bitten and Kevin ran away. At that exact moment, Gary sent a video to the chat. He shined a flashlight into his own eyes, and we could clearly see his pupils shrink. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Gary texted that he actually came back to the office to work late and just wanted us to stay and keep him company. We quickly texted him back, warning him not to come to our floor because there really was a variant. He did not reply. Anna called him directly. We could hear Gary screaming through the phone that he was already in the building. I took a deep breath and walked over to the water cooler. That was when I noticed Brad hiding his right hand. Blood was dripping from his fingertips. My heart skipped a beat. I yelled at everyone to get away from Brad. I asked him why he was bleeding. The remaining co-workers scrambled backward and aimed their sprays at him. They accused him of trying to get us killed. A variant bite turns you in exactly 30 minutes. It had been exactly 30 minutes since Brad left the room. Brad sighed and held up his arm. There was a deep gash on it. He swore he was not bitten. He claimed he scraped it on a piece of exposed wire by the third-floor stairwell when he was running. We all knew about that wire, but nobody lowered their guard. Brad told us to check his pupils if we did not believe him. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it in his eyes. His pupils constricted perfectly. He hid his arm because he knew we would panic. Logically, he was clean, but a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Something felt incredibly wrong. I wanted to get out of there. Suddenly, every phone in the room buzzed with an emergency broadcast alert. The government announced that a variant was confirmed inside our exact building in downtown Seattle and initiated a full lockdown. We were ordered to stay put and wait for rescue. All eyes turned back to Brad. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He argued that we just checked his eyes. He pointed out that if he were a variant, he would have just tricked us into going outside to get eaten instead of warning us. Jessica walked over to Brad. She said she trusted him and noted that variant wounds heal completely upon turning. She had a point. I looked at Brad's arm, which was still bleeding heavily. Jessica pulled him into a cubicle to bandage him up before he bled out. Nobody else was in a joking mood. A building lockdown meant there were at least 2 variants inside. We had no idea when the rescue teams would arrive, and Chloe was supposedly bitten. The air grew heavy. My phone buzzed again. It was a private message from Chloe. She told me to get away from Brad immediately because he was bitten. Cold sweat broke out on my back. I swallowed hard and looked at Anna. She was staring at me with the same terrified expression. She had received the same text. Chloe said she was hiding on the 6th floor and begged us to come down. Anna leaned in close and whispered, asking what we should do. Before I could process it, someone banged on the office door. It was Gary. He was yelling that he got the lockdown text and needed us to let him in. Jessica cracked the door open and yanked him inside. Gary was drenched in sweat. He said he tried to leave after Anna called him, but the exits were sealed. A coworker checked Gary's pupils with a light. They were fine and he had no scratches on him. I watched the others. It seemed only Anna and I got Chloe's warning. Chloe texted again, swearing she was telling the truth. She said the elevators were dead, so they took the stairs. They ran into a variant on the 3rd floor and scattered. She hid on the 5th floor and clearly saw Brad get bitten. I thought for a second and texted back, asking about Kevin. She said Kevin ran the fastest and vanished. Anna could not sit still anymore. She stood up, ready to leave. Then Kevin sent a message to the main office group. He warned everyone that Brad and Chloe were both bitten. Several co-workers quietly stepped away from Brad. Kevin claimed he was safe on the 8th floor and told us to find an excuse to leave the office and join him. He specifically mentioned the gash on Brad's arm as a bite mark. Chloe and Brad were accusing each other of being bitten, but both agreed Kevin ran away. Kevin, however, claimed both of them were infected. Anna was sweating profusely. She asked me who we were supposed to believe. 2 co-workers grabbed their heavy umbrellas and said they were going to risk it in the halls. Brad lunged forward and blocked the door. He insisted it was suicide to go out there. A hot-headed guy slapped Brad's hand away. He accused Brad of being infected and trying to trap us as his personal buffet. Brad froze, his face flushing with anger. He yelled that he was just trying to help and reminded them he passed the eye test. He ripped the door open and told them to go die if they wanted to. The 2 co-workers exchanged a look and hurried out. Seeing them leave made the others restless. Chloe texted again, begging us to hurry before it was too late. She sent a shaky video from a stairwell corner. It showed Brad running up the stairs with a variant sprinting right behind him. Brad tripped, fell hard, and sliced his arm on the exposed wire. The video cut off there. She must have run right after filming that. A chill crawled under my skin. I turned my head stiffly. Brad had walked up right behind me and was staring a hole through me. He noted that I looked pale and asked if I received some bad news. I jumped up, backed away, and gripped my paralyzer spray. I demanded to check his pupils one more time. Brad frowned. He reminded me we already did that. I sneered and reached for the crowbar I kept under my desk. I asked if he was scared or just guilty. Everyone knew the mutation took time. Passing the test earlier did not mean he was safe now. Anna backed me up. She reminded everyone that Brad was the one with an open wound. Jessica stepped in to defend him. She rolled her eyes and complained that Anna and I were being hysterical. She pointed out that Anna was the one who suspected Gary earlier. Jessica declared she trusted Brad completely. The room was split. Some wanted a retest, while others thought we were being paranoid. They argued that if Brad were a variant, he would have attacked by now. Brad threw his hands up in surrender. He agreed to the test but demanded an apology from Anna and me if he passed. I shined the light into both of his eyes. They constricted perfectly. My palms were sweating. A massive wave of wrongness washed over me. I noticed a faint bloodstain under Brad's collar. He had flipped it up to hide it. If you were not looking closely, you would miss it. Jessica smirked and demanded our apology. Anna and I bowed our heads and muttered a sorry. The rest of the office visibly relaxed. Chloe texted again, pleading with us to get away from Brad. My squad chat lit up. Sarah texted that the lockdown in our sector felt wrong. Luke added that the restaurants downtown were kicking people out and telling them to go straight home. Sarah told me to get out of the building if I could and to keep them posted. I put my phone away and nudged Anna. I whispered that we were going to find Chloe. We told the room we needed to use the restroom. Jessica mocked us on our way out, telling us not to fall into the toilet or get eaten. Once in the hall, Anna asked why we were leaving if Brad passed the test. I shook my head. I told her my gut was screaming that something was fundamentally wrong today. As we reached the 7th floor, I heard footsteps behind us. I peeked around the corner and saw Gary following us. I stared at him flatly and asked if he was planning to follow us into the women's restroom. Gary rubbed his hands together awkwardly. He pointed out that the restrooms were on our floor, so we were clearly sneaking off. He smiled nervously and admitted he felt something was off too. He wanted to find a place to hide and begged to tag along. Anna and I studied him. His fear looked genuine. I asked if he saw Kevin's message. He looked embarrassed and said he did, but he was too scared of Kevin to go up to the 8th floor. Anna scoffed and said we were going to find Chloe. She challenged him, asking if he was scared of that. Gary looked stunned. He clearly did not expect that, and he scratched his head in indecision. Eventually, he sighed and said he would rather stick with us than stay in the same room as Brad. We made Gary walk in front of us. We headed down to the 6th floor. It was a kids' dance studio that was only busy on weekends. Right now, it was dead silent. The lock on the main door was busted. Chloe must have broken in. We walked inside, and Chloe waved at us from a dark corner. She was hiding in one of the back practice rooms. As soon as we stepped in, she locked the door behind us. Her forehead was covered in sweat, and she was shaking uncontrollably. I patted her shoulder to calm her down. Gary let out a huge breath and went straight to the water fountain, chugging from a paper cup. Chloe's lips were pale. She said she was terrified Brad had killed us. Kevin's message popped up again. He asked why only 2 people left the office. He told everyone to stay away from Brad and Chloe and promised to lead us to the rescue teams. Anna nervously pulled out her flashlight and checked Chloe's eyes. They constricted normally. I asked Chloe what really happened with Kevin. She shook her head. She said when they saw the variant, they all ran. Kevin just vanished. Brad tripped and got grabbed. I frowned. I asked why they did not use their sprays. Chloe slammed her fist against her leg in realization. She explained that Kevin took all their sprays. He claimed he would take the lead. The plan was for Kevin to spray the variant, Brad to smash its head in, and Chloe to finish it off. Her eyes filled with hatred. She said when the variant appeared, Kevin did not say a word. He just turned and sprinted away with all their weapons. She said he intentionally tried to get them killed. Kevin was just a quiet, average guy in accounting. He never volunteered for anything. Why would he suddenly offer to take the lead and hold all the weapons? A terrifying thought struck me, sending ice through my veins. Kevin wanted them dead, but he had no personal grudge against them. There was only one logical explanation. Kevin was already a variant. Anna and I exchanged a horrified look. She had reached the exact same conclusion. That meant the coworkers who went up to the 8th floor were walking into a slaughterhouse. Gary patted his chest and praised his own luck for following us instead. Chloe looked confused. I explained my theory to her. She shrank back in fear, thanking God she survived. We sat in the dark studio in silence. I scrolled through the news on my phone. The city had just issued a severe emergency alert. All citizens were ordered to return home immediately, lock their doors, trust no one, and wait for military extraction. My hands went cold. Felt exactly like the first week of the outbreak. What was happening out there? After a long silence, Gary suggested we warn the others about Brad and Kevin. I asked him who would actually believe us. Plus, how could we be sure the others were not infected by now? Gary fell silent, rubbing his palms together anxiously. Chloe kept checking her phone, wondering when the rescue teams would arrive. It had been over an hour, and the sun was setting. I texted Sarah and Luke. They were holed up at Sarah's apartment and had no idea what was going on either. I gave them a quick rundown of everything that happened in the building. Sarah was the brains of our group. I hoped she could figure something out. The last rays of sunlight faded, plunging the dance studio into pitch black. Gary offered to turn on the lights. I grabbed his wrist and told him that would just broadcast our location to the variants. Anna buried her face in her knees. Her voice was muffled as she asked if we were going to die here. Gary clicked his tongue and told her not to jinx it, reminding us we still had our paralyzer sprays. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dark ceiling. What was the missing puzzle piece? A flash of insight hit me, but I could not quite grasp it. When did Kevin get infected? They check everyone's pupils at the lobby security desk every morning. Could not have been before work. It had to be during the time he left the office. And what about Brad? If he was infected, why did his pupils react normally? Unless, I shivered and sat up straight. A horrifying realization washed over me, bringing goosebumps to my skin. Unless the variants had evolved. Unless their pupils could now mimic human reactions. I grabbed Chloe and asked how exactly they identified the variant in the stairwell. Chloe looked at me like I was crazy. She said they used the pupil test. When Kevin ran, Brad shined his heavy tactical flashlight at the thing chasing them, and its pupils did not change. That was how they knew. Anna asked if I figured something out. I slumped back into my chair and shook my head. I hoped my theory was wrong. If I was wrong, it meant the variants had not evolved, and our chances of survival were much higher. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Reading her message made my blood run cold. She had the exact same theory. The variants had evolved. If Sarah thought so too, it was basically a certainty. Luke and Sarah told me to trust absolutely no one. Sarah noted that if the evolved variants could pass the eye test, Kevin might have been infected before he even walked into the building. She also theorized that there were now two types of variants in the world. The old ones failed the eye test and the new ones passed it. They started brainstorming ways to identify the evolved ones. They were still monsters, so there had to be a biological difference. Luke suggested body temperature, mentioning zombie movies. Sarah shot that down, saying a cold body would be too obvious and would count as a regression, not an evolution. Luke suggested blood color and told me to go check if Brad's blood was red. I texted back that it was definitely red. Luke then suggested a sense of smell. He joked that I should go fart in front of them and see if they react. I told him to shut up. He said he was just trying to lighten the mood. I asked Sarah if the paralyzer spray would work on the evolved ones. She said she was not sure, but probably not. My heart sank. Our only defense was useless. Well, not entirely useless. If we ran into an old variant, it might buy us a few seconds. While I was glued to my screen, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt someone staring at me. I turned my head slowly and met a pair of pitch-black eyes. Gary was leaning in, his face inches from my ear. I suppressed a scream, scrambled backward, and raised my crowbar to strike. Gary threw his hands up and whispered for me to stop. In the faint glow of my phone screen, I saw his apologetic smile. I cursed at him, asking what his problem was. Anna and Chloe heard the commotion and rushed over. Gary waved his hands defensively. He said he saw me smiling at my phone and just wanted to see what was so funny. I let out a bitter laugh. I told him if he ever sneaked up on me again, I would smash his skull. Gary chuckled awkwardly and sat back down on the sofa. Out of the 3 people with me, Gary was my prime suspect. He clocked out early, sent a warning, and then somehow ended up back in the building. None of it made sense. But if he was an evolved variant, how could I prove it? I could not just stab him to see if he healed. And why was he just hanging out with us? Was he afraid of the paralyzer spray? I needed to test him. I rubbed my stomach and complained that I was starving. Anna gave me a look of disbelief, asking how I could think about food at a time like this. I smiled sheepishly. I told them I knew the dance instructors kept a stash of instant ramen in the back storage room. I had explored the studio when it first opened just out of boredom. Chloe chimed in, admitting she was hungry too. I grabbed my crowbar, flashlight, and spray. I said I would go grab the food and told them to wait here. Chloe was too scared to move. Just as I reached the door, Gary jogged over and insisted on coming with me. He said it was not safe for a woman to wander around alone. I pretended to be annoyed and rejected him. He apologized profusely until I finally relented. The hallway was suffocatingly quiet. The only sound was our footsteps echoing off the walls. I watched Gary's back closely, but he moved like a normal person. When we reached the storage room, I clicked on my flashlight and casually asked him what flavor he wanted. He said anything was fine. I intentionally walked deeper into the room. A soft click echoed behind me. It was faint, but I heard it. Gary had locked the storage room door. Then he started humming a cheerful tune. I told him to knock it off and asked what he was so happy about. He chuckled. He said he was just thinking about a delicious meal. I took a deep breath to steady my racing heart. I clicked off my flashlight and ducked behind a tall metal shelving unit. I listened as his footsteps drew closer. He called out my name in a sing-song voice, complaining that I was taking too long. Then, I heard a wet, slurping sound. He was licking his lips. The sound of thick saliva hitting the linoleum floor reached my ears. Each drop sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The slurping stopped. The room fell dead silent. My heart hammered against my ribs. In the darkness, I felt something cold and viscous drip onto my hair. I fought down a wave of nausea. I squeezed my eyes shut, aimed my spray straight up, and pressed the nozzle. In the faint moonlight filtering through the high windows, I saw Gary. He was clinging to the ceiling. His neck was stretched out to an impossible, unnatural length, and he was staring straight down at me. He bared rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. Drool cascaded from his mouth onto my head. The moment the chemical spray hit his face, he shrieked. His head thrashed wildly in the air like a dying worm. He retracted his elongated neck and covered his face with his hands. Seeing him in agony, I let out a breath. The spray still worked. I gripped my crowbar and dashed out from behind the shelf. This was my chance to kill him. Gary was sobbing, his voice glitching like a broken record. He seemed completely paralyzed. I closed the distance, raising the heavy iron bar. But a few feet away, I slammed on the brakes. Pure terror shot through my veins. Through the gaps in his fingers, Gary was staring right at me. He was smiling, a wide, malicious grin. He was completely unaffected. The glitchy sobbing morphed into a sinister giggle. He pulled his hands away and burst into manic laughter. He mocked me, saying he totally fooled me. He twisted his torso into a grotesque, unnatural angle and asked if he should act more in pain. I swallowed hard. My palms were so sweaty the crowbar was slipping from my grip. What was I supposed to do? I slowly backed away. Gary laughed harder. He told me not to run and promised to be gentle. He slurped loudly. I asked him when he got infected. He told me to stand still and he would tell me. I cursed myself for being so arrogant. I should have just stayed in the practice room and waited for extraction. Gary fed on my despair. My fear excited him. He told me to look more terrified because it made the meat taste better. His body contorted as he launched himself at me with terrifying speed. I timed it perfectly and kicked a heavy metal rack directly into his path. He tripped over it. I grabbed a heavy microwave from a counter and smashed it down onto his skull. It barely fazed him. I needed to destroy his brain. I swung the crowbar at his head, but my hands were too slippery to do real damage. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted an industrial blender plugged into the wall. I smashed the glass pitcher off it, grabbed the motorized base with the exposed spinning blades, and slammed it down onto Gary's face. I hit the power switch. I will spare you the details. Let us just say it was enough to ruin my appetite for a very long time. Gary was reduced to a pile of gore. The storage room reeked of copper and rot. I slid down the wall, completely drained. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely pick up a cup of ramen. I had killed variants before, but never in such a gruesome way. The smell made me dry heave. Once I caught my breath, I used a table to pull myself up. I inspected his remains, but he looked just like a regular dead variant. I went to the staff restroom and scrubbed the foul blood off my face and arms. My phone started buzzing like crazy. It was Anna. She asked if I was okay and what was taking so long. I texted her I would be right there. Then I checked the squad chat. Sarah had texted. She said the spray was officially useless against the evolved ones. She told me our building was a lost cause and that she and Luke had managed to escape their lockdown. They were coming to get me. Luke added that they found the biological difference. If you cut a piece of hair from an evolved variant, the hair will writhe and twist like a dying worm. A wave of disgust washed over me. No wonder I did not notice anything different about Gary's corpse. I had blended his head into a smoothie. I quickly typed out what just happened. Luke told me I was a badass and apologized for ruining my appetite. I thanked him sarcastically. I grabbed some snacks and headed back to the dance studio. I still had my suspicions about Anna and Chloe. I needed to test them. I pinched my own thigh hard to force tears into my eyes before opening the door. I stumbled in, crying, and told them I ran into a variant in the storage room but managed to lock it inside. I handed them the food. Chloe was starving and immediately started eating. Anna offered me a cup of noodles, but I waved it off. I told them the adrenaline killed my appetite. Honestly, I just wanted to throw up. While they were distracted by the food, I pulled a small pair of scissors from my bag. I quietly snipped a tiny lock of hair from each of their heads. The strands lay perfectly still in my palm. No briggling. I exhaled a massive sigh of relief and collapsed onto the sofa. They turned around, confused. I told them to finish eating and I would explain everything. It had been 2 hours since the lockdown. No rescue teams. The office chat was dead. Everyone was either infected or hiding. Once they finished eating, I told them to brace themselves. I explained what really happened to Gary and told them about the evolved variants. Their eyes went wide. They both scrambled to the trash can and threw up everything they just ate. I smiled bitterly and apologized for letting them eat first. Anna glared at me, her voice hoarse, asking what the point of eating was if she was just going to puke it up. We sat on the floor, trying to come up with a plan. Waiting to die was not an option. We had to get out, but the ground floor was sealed. Sarah texted me. She said Luke got a tip that the military was sending helicopters for rooftop evacuations. They were heading to my building and told me to get to the roof. I asked how they planned to get inside. Luke replied that the police barricade outside had suddenly vanished, probably due to a breach elsewhere. I told them I was on the 6th floor. We moved to a more secure room to wait. Suddenly, the office chat lit up. Jessica sent a frantic message. She said Brad really was a variant and almost bit her, but she and another guy managed to kill him. She tagged Kevin, apologizing for doubting him, and asked where he was so they could group up. Chloe gripped her phone, looking torn. She asked if we should warn Jessica that Kevin was infected. I shook my head firmly. I asked her how she knew Jessica was not a variant trying to lure out survivors. Anna agreed with me. Chloe looked horrified but nodded, realizing she almost got us killed with her kindness. Kevin finally replied. He told Jessica to stay in the office. He refused to reveal his location, claiming he did not know if she was infected. Jessica argued that he could check her pupils. Kevin shot back that Brad passed the pupil test too, so it meant nothing. Jessica stopped replying. Chloe was completely confused, muttering that maybe Kevin was human after all. I told her it did not matter. We could not trust anyone but ourselves. 20 minutes passed. Sarah and Luke were late. I texted them, asking if they ran into trouble. Luke replied they were almost there. 5 minutes later, the door creaked open, and I saw their familiar faces. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Sarah tossed me a sleek tactical machete. She said it was time to move. I asked where she got it. Luke raised his hand proudly, demanding credit. I rolled my eyes and thanked him. Sarah whispered, asking if Anna and Chloe were clean. I nodded and said I did the hair test. I handed my crowbar to Anna. We moved out. Our building was only 12 stories high. We crept up the stairwell, keeping our footsteps light. It was quiet, too quiet. As we reached the 9th floor landing, I heard something. Beneath the sound of our own footsteps, there was a faint shuffling. Someone was following us. I grabbed Luke's shoulder and put a finger to my lips. Sarah, who was taking point, slowed her pace. We waited by the corner. The second the person stepped onto the landing, I thrust the machete forward, stopping an inch from their throat. It was Jessica. She threw her hands up in terror, stuttering my name and begging me not to shoot. I looked her up and down, demanding to know why she was following us. Jessica swallowed hard. She claimed she sneaked out to use the restroom and saw us heading up. She figured we knew a way out and wanted to tag along. Her eyes darted around nervously. She pulled out her flashlight and shined it in her own eyes, proving her pupils constricted. I asked about the others. She sighed and said they were still hiding in the office. She mentioned Brad bit someone else, but both of them were dead now. I nodded and motioned for her to walk in front of us. As she squeezed past me, I used my scissors to snip a tiny piece of her hair. The moment it hit my palm, the strands twisted and writhed frantically like maggots before going still. I gasped and violently shook my hand to get the disgusting things off me. Before I could even speak, Sarah moved. With brutal efficiency, she drove her combat knife straight into Jessica's neck, pulled a heavy brick from her tactical bag, and smashed it into Jessica's skull. Chloe almost screamed, but Anna clamped a hand over her mouth. Both of them turned pale and gagged. Sarah clicked her tongue, wiping her blade on Jessica's clothes. She coldly ordered us to move faster. The variants in the building definitely knew we were here now. We sprinted up the stairs. Suddenly, a cacophony of heavy footsteps and ear-piercing shrieks erupted from the floors below us. A horde was rushing up the stairwell. We had 3 floors left. We pushed our legs to the absolute limit. I could see the heavy metal door to the roof. We were so close. Just as I reached for the handle, a freezing chill crawled up my spine. I spun around. A variant was right behind me. Its neck was stretched out, and it flashed me a horrifying blood-stained smile. Putrid saliva dripped from its jaws. Without hesitating, I gripped the machete with both hands and swung with everything I had. The blade sliced clean through its elongated neck, collapsed into a heap of twitching meat. The horde was swarming up the stairs, mere seconds away. We burst onto the roof and slammed the heavy door shut. We dragged old AC units, metal pipes, and wooden pallets to barricade it. Once it was secure, I collapsed onto the gravel roof, my clothes soaked in sweat. I gasped for air and asked Luke how far out the chopper was. He checked his watch and said 10 minutes. I groaned, burying my face in my hands. In 10 minutes, we would be torn to shreds. Chloe was hugging her knees, sobbing quietly. Sarah stood silently, wiping her blade. A deafening crash echoed across the roof. The metal door buckled inward. The screeching metal sounded like a death knell. We backed up to the edge of the roof, gripping our weapons tightly. The door was dented and hinges were snapping. I took a deep breath, letting my racing heart settle. If this was it, so be it. With a final, explosive crash, the door blew off its hinges in a cloud of dust. The variants poured out, snarling and snapping. Just as they lunged, the thunderous roar of helicopter rotors washed over us. A massive military chopper hovered above. Someone yelled over a megaphone for us to get down. We hit the deck. The crew dropped canisters of white gas onto the roof. The moment the gas touched the variants, they froze like statues, completely paralyzed. A rope ladder dropped down. We scrambled up into the cabin. Sitting in the chopper, looking down at the paralyzed monsters, I felt a surge of awe for the military. The variants had just evolved, and the government already had a new chemical weapon to neutralize them. I looked at the heavily armored rescue operative holding an assault rifle. I asked him what kind of gas that was. Through his dark visor, I swear I saw him smirk. He said it was just standard variant paralyzer gas. He kicked my backpack, which had my own spray in it, and mocked us, asking why we could not handle a few variants if we had the spray on us. My ears started ringing. All the sound in the cabin seemed to fade away. The standard spray was completely useless against evolved variants. I swallowed hard, watching his mouth move. Wait, where was his visor? When did he take his helmet off? I slowly backed up until I bumped into Sarah, who was resting her eyes against the bulkhead. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I reached down, searching blindly for my machete. I whispered to Sarah that these guys were not the military. The operative's mouth stretched into a grotesque, unnaturally wide grin. A sudden, sharp pain exploded in the back of my head. My vision went black. My last conscious thought was that we were dead. When I opened my eyes again, the deafening roar of the helicopter rotors still filled my ears. My friends and I were bound tight with heavy zip ties. The operative who knocked me out was sitting across from us. His legs crossed casually. His eyes burned with a manic, predatory hunger. He smiled and welcomed us to the human breeding farm. My eyes darted past him, looking out the chopper's window. A massive, brutalist steel fortress loomed on the horizon, rising out of the ruins of the city. It looked like a giant, inescapable cage. As we drew closer, I could see the silhouettes of people pressed against the tiny, barred windows. Their faces were etched with absolute, soul-crushing despair.